everybody. Today, I am very excited to welcome Regine Roy to the podcast. Regine is the president and founder of the Queen Geniuses, Inc. She is a West Burghardt Turner Fellow, a graduate of Stony Brook University's School of Social Welfare, and committed to service, healing, and transforming lives through explorative and informative workshops. Regine has developed a social emotional learning curriculum that powerfully supports educational communities and government agencies in training educators, caseworkers, clinicians, medical providers, social workers, and other human service professionals who serve populations that have been victims of neglect, intergenerational poverty, and sexual trauma. She has also helped shifting hierarchical dynamics in academic and corporate settings, empowering professionals to seek out the possibility of horizontal and vertical peer-to-peer mentoring. She has an innate and unique ability to inspire growth and transformation to those who are dedicated to becoming more informed and achieving professional goals to benefit the populations they serve. She recognizes the gamut of challenges individuals and communities face today and the ever-growing need for a fresh lens, new insight, and empowered choice making. Regine and her social emotional learning programs offer a wide range of engaging workshops, seminars, and group mentoring. I'm super excited to hear Regine's story, and I hope you will join me in welcoming her. Well, hi, Regine. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Attachment Theory in Action.
Hi, Kirsty. I'm so happy to be here.
So my regular listeners know that we dive right in, and I always ask the same question of all my guests, and that question really relates to kind of either our early life experiences or earlier on in your career. And so I just want to pose to you, was there anything early on in life that has led you down this path, the journey that you've been on and to where you are now? Tell us a bit about your story.
Well, a little bit about me. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York. My family, I am first generation Haitian American. My family immigrated here in the late 1960s. And I grew up with not so much. And I think growing up with not so much was really it has its ups and downs, right? Because there's a level of resilience and grit that I had to develop. I was able to dream in a way that, I didn't have a lot to see and create from, but like the sky was the limit when you grow up, not so much, right? And so a lot of the work that I do for a living, what I do is I'm a mental health consultant. I am the president and founder of a program called Queen Geniuses Incorporated, and I teach social emotional learning skills to young people, to professionals, and to the families of those young people. And so, a lot with what I do, it's really around pulling from my roots, pulling from that idea of like not having so much and what can we create and build on top of that while we heal some of that.
So tell me a little bit more about your relationships growing up. So, you have uh, described some of your upbringing with regards, the economic factors and that kind of thing. What about your relationships?
So it's really interesting because, like many, and not all, but everyone's story is different. But I grew up with my mother and my father. There's five of us. And around at 7 years old, they split. And like most young people, when there's a divorce, it rattles your world. But really, I think what added to that split was my oldest brother. He ended up getting diagnosed with a rare form of multiple sclerosis. Like he was misdiagnosed many times, so we never really knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that on top of the divorce is really what kind of created some core memories and created some core identity pieces of myself that I still attribute to that time.
Okay, tell us. So, yeah, well, before I dive in a bit more, what you're describing to me, it, really, it reflects a lot of what we talk about with our youth today and what I talk about with other professionals in terms of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, potentially even traumatic experiences, depending on who you've got around you. And, what you're describing is that kind of culmination of experiences, the living in kind of, oh, not sure if we've quite got enough, combined with the divorce and then your brother's illness on top of that, that puts a lot of pressure on a family unit.
Yeah, and a lot of pressure on a child because suddenly I was having to do adult things, right?
Mm,
Like we had a home attendant that was living with us. And, like in the middle of the night when the home attendant wasn't there and my mom needed support in like turning my brother who had eventually become bedridden, those were things that me and my younger sister would do, right? And so
mm,
like now where a typical 10, 11-year-old is playing with their dolls, I'm like juggling playing with my dolls and also um grieving the loss of my brother, even though he's living,
mm,
he's not
mm,
who he once was.
mm. I thank you for sharing that because that's a very vulnerable place to go, and I think that people who have not had those experiences, um, that's something that you can't really imagine. You really are from the outside, oh, he's still there and he's, you know, uh, but no, you're really grieving the loss of a person that was once one way and now they're different.
Or even a parent that was once one way and now different, right?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
what does that mean for you as a child?
Hmm. Yeah, you touched a little bit on your identity. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe how that has shifted or shifted through your childhood into today?
Identity as far as what in particular?
Well, you mentioned like you're just, I think maybe in this context, like your identity within the family system, perhaps. And maybe you've talked a little bit about that because you kind of taken on a bit more of a caregiving role, a bit more of an adult role.
Yeah, yeah. I think I really, at a young age, I probably wouldn't have called it this, but I was definitely taking the actions that a trailblazer would, right?
Hmm.
Like even inside of the caretaking, like I knew that it was temporary. I knew that I wouldn't be doing that forever. I knew that there were things that I needed to develop in myself, skills that I needed to develop in myself that maybe my family of origin was not going to teach me. Maybe
Mm,
I had to develop those skills from somewhere else, coming from a family that survived a dictatorship in a third world country, like there's trauma associated with
mm,
that. There are skills that maybe a parent from that day and age wouldn't necessarily have to pass on to their children, right? Now,
mhm,
I didn't
mhm,
know that, but I knew inherently as a little girl, like there were skills that I needed to find a way to learn elsewhere. And I did do that.
And would you say that you needed to learn them in order to be successful in the world that you found yourself in as a little girl and moving forward?
I don't know. I never thought about like being successful as a little girl.
Mhm,
But I knew that there were tools and skills that I had as a little girl that would help me to be successful in the future.
mhm,
Like in the midst of everything that I was dealing with, I was always very talkative. I loved talking to adults. I knew that there was a gift in that, because like these people in my head were my partners. And like
mhm.
there was a part of me as a little girl that I knew that they were learning from me too.
I
Was
love
like
that.
a privilege for them. Like I wouldn't have used those words, but I knew it. The way they
Hmm.
would engage me, the way they would talk to me, like I was like a little adult. I was like, oh. like they're learning too. This is really cool.
I love this because I can hear where this is going with your future business and corporation and what you've done as an adult. But I want to stay here for a minute because I think it's so we can easily brush over that, but really what those people that you're describing, they created that safety for you, that connection, that reciprocity that we find that we talk about when we talk about attachment theory.
I had so much of that in my life as a kid. I like the teachers, the principals, people outside, like some of the first jobs that I had so many people that had my back in
Mhm,
spite of what I was going through. And so,
mhm,
like, there was this strange sense of like security that I also had, like in the midst of like this really chaotic environment that I was growing up in.
mhm. I think that that is so valuable for us to just recognize for a minute because what I was thinking in my head was, well, how did you become more resilient? And I say more resilient because you had resilience within you, that it was there and it's in every child. But I think it becomes nurtured. And I feel like what you're really describing is that they helped nurture that resilience in you, regardless of what was happening in other parts of your world. They helped nurture that resilience and develop what was already there.
They did. It was, I mean, I can just think of some of the people, but there were so many different players. Like I remember like my elementary school principal really took a liking to my mom, and like it was just a really kind relationship. And that was around the time my brother started getting sick. And I
Mm,
remember like that kind relationship really had that principal look out for me and my younger sister in a way that I don't know if my mom would have had the energy and the
mm,
capacity to as she was dealing with the divorce and all of the things, right? Like,
mm,
so like we had these people in the school making sure that the Roy sisters were good,
mhm,
they made
mhm,
sure that like we went to a really great high school, even growing up in like the community that we grew up in. Like they made sure that we went to a great junior high school. We had relationships with those principals and that whole administration team. My
mhm,
one of my sixth grade teachers, I like by the time I was in high school, I was like hanging out with her. You know what I mean? Like I would go over and sleep over at her house when like things got too chaotic. I had
mhm,
a place to land. You
mm,
and so like I think that, like in spite of what people are going through, there are for me, I had these so many glimmers of like possibility and I had so many people that were rooting me on because things really could have gone easily another way. Eas-
mhm, mhm. I love that you're sharing all of this because it really does highlight that you see it said and posted on pictures and places, that it just takes one caring adult, but you really are proof that it does. And maybe it's not just one, but it really does help a child to overcome or move beyond the trauma that they were experiencing at that time if they have, as you called it, a safe place to land, that unconditional safe place to land. And I also want to highlight as well, you made a comment that you said, they provided me with things that maybe my mom wouldn't have had the energy to provide. I talk a lot when I work with educators or I'm teaching people about trauma or ACEs for the first time that. yes, unfortunately, there are situations where there's malicious intent behind what's happening to a child, but there's also other situations that there's no intent behind it. It's really a parent or a caregiver who are trying the best they can with what they have. And sometimes that means that they cannot be that emotionally responsive attachment figure for a child. And I'm not saying that your mom wasn't, but sometimes it leads to that, which can then leave that child feeling isolated and unable to manage that trauma because they don't have that place to land. But we tend to kind of jump into judgment, don't we, when we think about parents and caregivers, and often it's not that's not the case. They're genuinely trying the best they can.
Yeah. I mean, if I could be really honest, like I go into, like I'm a grown adult now, right? And so like, but I still have moments that I get triggered by my parents and like I become a child in that moment, right? Like, so there are moments where I could like the logical, mature, grounded, healed part of my consciousness could be like, oh, well, like these two people got together very young. They had five kids, life happened. They were immigrants, all of the things like they didn't grow up with YouTube, right? They didn't grow up with like all of these things that would normalize a lot of these conversations. COVID normalized talking about mental health in a way that people never did
Hmm.
5 years ago. Never, right? And so like the era that I grew up in, I could sometimes that logical part of my brain could be like, okay, this is who they were, this is why. But something happens, like in my own interpersonal reactions, or in conversations with either of them. And I could go just like that back into my inner child. I'm, like 14 years old all over again. And the compassion is out the window, right?
Hmm.
So, like me being able to, I think as a mental health professional, me having the ability to know that that can happen at the drop of a dime is helpful, but it still happens. I still get triggered and I still blame, point the finger, and then I have to remember, you know, they did the best they could with what they had. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that their best didn't create, severe trauma in the midst of
Hmm.
it all. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
here we are. We all have to move through and learn how to work through that in our.
Hmm. So I feel like we're getting to this point, so I'm going to take us there. Tell us a bit about Queen Geniuses and delve a little bit deeper into how did you decide, okay, this is really where I want to focus my attention? And then we'll come back a little bit to some of what you've been saying about, healing from the trauma and also about some of the differences in cultures as well, about how we address and talk about trauma and mental health. But first of all, tell us about Queen Geniuses.
So, a little bit about Queen Geniuses. It was really created, not intended to be a business. I was working in state politics back in 2012, 2011, 2012. It was my first job out of graduate school. And I was working for a state senator who was responsible for the district that I grew up in Brooklyn. So it was kind of a big deal.
Mhm.
Also just having the ability to see how legislators are able to like run things. I would be in the mayor's office one day, I would be upstate at the Capitol another day, or I would be working with the people in the community, the people that I essentially grew up around. So, like, I was doing this job, I knew I wasn't going to stay there for long. And one way that I figured that I could stay and enjoy it was by doing an event, and doing some sort of a flagship event. I thought it would be a one off. And that event was, I called it the Queen Geniuses Girls Empowerment Conference. And so, what that was I was going to organize a conference for the young women in the district that I grew up in. It would primarily be high school students. There would be workshops. Prior to working in politics, I was volunteering doing work with young girls because of how people had poured into me
Mm.
as a young girl. And so it was supposed to be a one off. And that one off in 2012 turned into six more events after. Um, I did my seventh annual event actually this year. I brought the event back. But it turned into six more events, and people were just asking me, like, well, what are you going to do with this? Like, do you have a curriculum? Is this something that, you think that you can do in schools? What would that look like? And one conversation led to another. I ended up quitting my job in 2015. I created a curriculum. I got some of my first contracts. And now for the past 10 years, this is what I've been doing full time.
Which is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And what a gift to give back, firstly to your community, but then to expand that and just give back to young women around, around the States.
Yeah, oh, totally. I've done work with young women all over. But really the work has turned into even more than that because like I barely do work with young girls now. I'm actually asked to do more work with families and professional teams.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting how you know, I- when I was younger, I almost gravitated more to that young girl, right?
Hmm.
And while I still am able to be playful and do great work with them, there's something about uh, creating these fun, playful environments for older people to tap into that inner child, talk from that point of view so that, we can do some great work, whether it's with families or whether it's within their professional spaces.
Okay, okay. So tell me a bit about like the themes. What kind of themes, and I know that this has changed, probably changed over the years, but are there any kind of recurring themes that at the conference or then, later in line in life with the work that you're doing with, teams and so on? What kind of themes come up? What's important for us to be thinking about?
Yeah, some of the themes that I always start with is how do we self-assess ourselves, And so I have a reclaiming your throne curriculum where we're really having people envision themselves through the form of play, right? Envision themselves as king and queens who are governing over their personal empires. If I'm working with a group of educators, I would have a part of their empire be their classroom that they're,
Mhm.
that they're governing over, that they're leading. Maybe a parent, their empire, part of their empire is how they run their household, right? Or a school principal, how they're running their school, right? That's just a portion of it because our empires are our lives, right? And so I would play these games that would have them assess, well, how are you governing this part of your life? Are you powerfully sitting on the throne? Are you one butt cheek on the throne, one butt cheek off the throne, right? Kind of like wobbly. Are you hiding behind the throne and not taking responsibility? Or are you in the possibility of being dethroned, right? So like
Mm.
we begin in in that conversation of like, well, let's self-assess where we are, and then like let's see like what is your communication flow, how do you typically communicate in some of these areas, and it leads into some deeper themes like when we're dealing with guilt and shame, where one of my last conference back in May was worthiness is messy, right? Like
Mhm.
how, and messy is an acronym, like, and so like how do you look at your life and see that inside of the chaos of some of the areas of your life, there's still worthiness that can be pulled from that, right? And the messy acronym, as we work through it, and I might share it a little later on, the messy acronym really supports us in safely talking about some of those messy topics or some of
Mm.
those messy concepts that might impact the way you work, might impact the way you parent, or might impact the way you show up academically.
Well, first of all, I love the whole kind of metaphor of, a king or a queen, and I just think it's a fantastic way for you to support people through that journey of awareness, because it's so hard. It's so hard for people to reflect inwardly. And there's so many barriers that a lot of people, I think, don't even know that are there for them. And so, yeah, I think the way that you have laid that out is just brilliant and just allows that kind of playfulness to allow us to go deeper, right? So I just love that. I have to, I'm going to ask you though, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I think you'll be good with this. Um, is that something that you have gone through yourself personally? Have you kind of sat and, in your mind at least, gone through that process of
Yeah.
of go
That's
ahead.
where inspiration comes from. Like I was actually just listening to something about an artist saying, like I just put out this breath of work and like now I'm being asked to like go to the studio and create again, but like I need to live in order to create.
Mm,
And so
mm,
like living is a big part of my creative process, right? Like breakups or, like arguments with friends or, like raising my rates or possibly not feeling worthy of, doing that, right? Like I have to go through it first. It needs to be authentic to me. I need to be actively addressing some of those themes and concepts, and sometimes, I might have put that theme and concept to the back burner, and I need to do the work myself in order for it to be effective with the
mhm,
people that I work with.
mhm.
So absolutely, I've used my life as the form of inspiration for the work that I do.
Absolutely brilliant. And I love, and I said this to you, but as we had our little chat prior to this conversation, but the theme worthiness is messy. I just think that uh, to me that sums up attachment. It's a way of summing up attachment, and we none of us exist in this place of 100% secure attachment. There's always parts of us that teeter into anxious or avoidant attachment, and for some of us it's more than others. Some of us can for the majority of the time live in this place of secure attachment, but there's always triggers, and like you mentioned about your relationship with your parents and how sometimes those triggers occur and it puts you right back at that inner child that you described, and challenges that attachment that you have with your parents or caregivers. And so I really appreciate your that theme of worthiness is messy. And I think that it keeps it really gentle as well, because it's not it, it's not so hard for people to go there when it's gentle like that.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? We kind of talked about that a bit earlier, but
Totally, like totally. It's all about all of these feelings are like it's like a line, like this linear, it's not a linear experience, but like it can go, from, like I feel like I'm a 10 at the worthiness level today versus I feel like I'm 0, right? And like, well, what is the mess that's getting in the way of the worthiness, right? And like, like sometimes like when I'm working with the kids, I'm like, well, what is a messy thing that's happening in your life right now? Obviously, we would have been working together for a while for me to be able to ask something like that.
Mhm,
But, like, it's even a fun way to be like, all right, well, let me share my mess first. And then like we can go around and we can start talking about it on a deeper level.
mhm. I can really picture that, almost with a group of teenage girls, who they all like to talk, but they don't really talk, do they? They talk around things. And so I love that you're able to kind of sit with that, whether it's individually or in a group, and kind of say, what messes are existing. And here, let me share mine first so that you know that this is a safe place for you to share as well.
Or we'll create characters, right? Like we'll do gestalt empty chair exercise where, I put an empty chair in the middle of the room and I'm like, let's create a character. How old are they? And what are they dressed like? What is their family? What are they dealing with at
Mhm.
home? Right? And what are some of the messy things that they're dealing with right now? And to keep it even safer, where they are not actually talking about their stuff directly, we get to create a character to like live with the trauma of some of the people in the room. Because certainly,
Mhm.
as they're saying things, they're pulling from inspiration from something within, right? It's
Mhm.
not just coming out of anywhere, right? So maybe the character will be able to hold it so it could be even safer to unpack.
So, tell me a bit more about uh we touched on it earlier about, some of the cultural differences in either African American or Latino communities with regards mental health. Um, would it be fair to say that perhaps one of the messes you were dealing with was perhaps some of those taboos as you were growing up?
Yeah, taboos around not talking, like I definitely was not encouraged to talk to anyone about what I was dealing with, but that was the thing that I learned to do differently at a very young age, like I remember when my brother passed away and like not many people in my high school knew that he was not well. And I remember really, like breaking down, the day that that he passed away. I remember breaking down in the classroom. And luckily I had a teacher that like put her hand on my shoulder and looked around and said, who else has experienced loss here? And it was around the time that 9/11 had happened. And so there were a lot of people in the Manhattan high school that I went to that experienced loss. And suddenly I wasn't alone, right? Like
Mhm.
I wasn't having to process that pain alone. So the taboo of not talking, that's certainly something that I learned to break. It broke me open and gave me, I saw power in vulnerability. I saw power in, like using my throat. Like I meditate often. My throat chakra has been activated more than ever over the years, right? Like giving me permission to like say what um typically isn't said and kind of bring some of that stuff to light so we can deal with it.
Mhm. And how do you support some of the young women that you worked with in doing that?
It's
It,
all
does it still exist? Let me preface that, or ask at least. Does this taboo still exist?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Um, certainly. I mean, I don't even think it's like in the African American or Latino community. I think it's everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how progressive parents are.
Mm-hmm.
Have a progressive parent who is maybe, I would say, some parents who are practicing gentle parenting. I think that is progressive parenting, right? I don't have children of my own, so I can, but I have raised my nephews, right? Like I can see how that is kind of changing the narrative. But if you're not a progressive parent, yeah, those taboos are there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like whether culturally or not, it's like the person has to choose whether to they are going to do things differently, whether they are going to listen to like, oh, well, my parents said to keep everything to myself, so I'm not going to say anything to during this workshop. And then
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily have an opportunity to break through with me. Maybe they will at another time, right? Like I really see a lot of the work that I do as planting a seed. There's no right way to do it. There's no right way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, yeah, I remember you saying that in our previous conversation too, about the goal is to plant a seed and for that it doesn't have to be right there with you, but if everybody who touches that child plants that seed, at some point that child is going to feel that I have a safe place to to speak, to tell my story, to share my journey. Um, and I feel like that again brings us right back to a secure attachment. It's to me a secure attachment first and foremost is unconditional love. So you can come to me with the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm going to be that same consistent support through all of those things. Um, and that really sets the foundation for a child to be able to speak up when they feel good, when they feel bad, when there's something terrible happening, when they maybe made a bad choice, versus I can't speak about this because I don't know how this person's going to react around me.
Oh yeah, yeah, like that. But what is the work that the parent is doing to nurture themselves, right? To soothe themselves in moments where they are feeling maybe a little dysregulated or their nervous system is jumbled. If the parent is not doing what they need to do, they can't teach that to their child. They cannot be that safe space to land for their child. And maybe they're not supposed to be that for their child,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Maybe someone else is meant to do that. Maybe it's a community of people, right?
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
also a lot of the things that I teach when I'm working is like, well, how do we learn to give ourselves grace, right? Even if it's not coming from, the people around us. I was very hard on my mother when I was a teenager. I was not nice. I wanted her to be something that she was not. I wanted her to provide something that she could not.
Hmm.
But I didn't understand that.
Hmm.
And so like when children have these high expectations of their parents that their parents cannot meet, like when I'm doing those family workshops, well, how are you giving yourself grace? How can you explain to your child, this is not something I can provide? Maybe you need to get it from somewhere else. My mom did that with me. She was very clear, like, there's certain things I can't help you with. You're gonna have to ask for help. It was the best gift, one of the best gifts that she gave me,
Mm.
because it gave me permission to look outside of myself.
And do you feel like you were able to look in a healthy way outside of yourself then because she gave you that permission?
It could have gone anyway, honestly, right? Like
Hmm.
I it could have gone anyway. Great. Thankfully, it went in a positive direction, right?
Hmm.
Because looking outside of yourself could be like you're involved with the wrong friends. Now you're doing drugs. Now you're right.
Right.
Of course, like I dabbled here and there in little things, but I never went that far down the deep end because I had accountability. Every
Hmm.
I knew even when my brother passed, like there was accountability from the sky. You know what I mean? I was like, he's looking, like I can't, you know. And so like it was the way I interpreted it, but every child interprets it differently.
Hmm. Hmm.
All the guardrails in place, but people have free will. They can do whatever it is that they want
Hmm.
to.
I want to go back to what you were mentioning about, what work is the parent doing, and link that to your comments about like the inner child, because I feel like a lot of what our parents are experiencing are, well, this is an assumption, so I'm going to take that back, but I feel like for some parents and caregivers, it's the inner child that's getting in the way of how they can then be for their children.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I mean, like I think I see so many families when I'm working with them. I see I don't know. I think it's because I've done my own inner child work that I can see the kid almost in any adult. Like a 80-year-old person, I can see that innocence, that longing, right? And
Mm.
I think that's really hard work to do, Like I have had the privilege of doing a lot of self-development programs, a lot of leadership courses, a lot of mental health programs that I was I think really spiritually guided too, that supported me in like doing some of that inner work. I'm about
Mm-hmm.
to go on my third 10-day meditation retreat, right? And like I've been doing them since 2012. I'm about to go on my third one. When you're sitting in silence and when you're, like doing that psychosomatic work, it's healing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you are activating these parts of your consciousness that you talk therapy could never, right? Like it,
Mm-hmm.
it's all in silence, it's all intentional. But because I've had the privilege of dabbling in so many different modalities, I have been able to do that inner child work where for the average parent that is juggling children, this economy, all of the political changes, it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Not easy.
Mm-hmm.
I find that when I'm working with families, they're just happy that they can talk. They're
Mm-hmm.
happy that am creating a space where they can play and where they can safely say some things that they would not typically say in the presence of any new person or any
Mm-hmm.
other group of parents. There's so much judgment. There's so much like, you need to do it this way. Like, if you're giving it the best you can, if we're talking in a safe environment, maybe you'll learn from someone else in the room. Maybe you'll say something that you've never said before. Maybe you'll seek out support that you needed, that you didn't know you needed. It's really
Mm-hmm.
about bringing some of that unconscious to conscious.
Mm-hmm. And I hear I hear you planting the seed again. That you're planting the seed with parents as well as with the children and young people.
1,000%, 1,000%. And it's not, the work that I do, it's not easy to see or explain. You're not going to get it in one workshop, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like it's even when you meditate one time or you work out a couple of times a week, like you're not going to see those results until much later on. And like when you
Mm-hmm.
develop that lifestyle practice, when you develop that commitment to learn how to take care of that little person within yourself, that
Mm-hmm.
is a lifestyle. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, So like it's not just a quick one and done, but it's a seed.
Mm-hmm.
Keep on
Well, and I really appreciate that because I do feel like so many of our families, they're just living, they're living in survival mode, right? Like a lot of our teachers are as well, and because of the climate and all the other stuff, as well as what's inside of us. And so, yeah, I mean, I really respect you saying about families that, this isn't something that's going to happen in an instant, but we fully respect that it's not going to happen in an instant for you because of all of the stuff that comes along with life.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish that we had I wish that we could create. I wish that we could create a 10-day meditation, retreat for parents, but it doesn't happen like that.
Not realistic. Not everyone is called to that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I know there sometimes I'm getting like an inner nudge to like listen to a podcast, or I'll learn about, like something that's going to like tap on something that has not yet been addressed, right?
Hmm.
Um and so like that's my gift. Like how are other people learning to tap into whatever their intuitive gifts are, because like
Hmm.
that it's a gift, like it's a gift when you're able to like like kind of sense like, ooh, something is wrong here. Where am I being led to? What am I being led to do? What is the source of healing that I'm being, you know um that's being pulled towards me, like that's also a sensitivity that I think we all have, but we don't
Hmm.
always all have the luxury of really being able to develop because
Right,
of life,
right.
because of
And
life.
that's where I think somebody like you and the work that you're doing is so valuable. And just again, I'm going to say again, planting that seed is such a gift to give to other people. And yeah, you're right. They'll take it wherever they take it. But the hope is if you continue to plant those seeds, then it is going to eventually grow over time.
Yes. And I think a really big thing that, has my work differ from how other people do it is I I am not always a big proponent of like, here's the blueprint. This is how you do it. Here's step number one. Here's step number two. Like, I've spoken a lot about intuition and developing that intuition so that you could see what is best for you, or
Mhm,
hear maybe another facilitator, another consultant talk about like a how to, and you'll see which one of those steps you're guided to, like there's no right way to do anything,
mhm,
no
mhm.
right way to heal. There's no right way. And
Right,
everyone,
because you're individual.
yeah, everyone's journey is different. So you can have all of the different attachment styles, but like people are going to be triggered in different ways.
Mhm,
Like how do you learn how to manage that within yourself? That's a personal journey.
mhm. Well, Regine, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with us and the amazing work that you're doing. We will make sure, as always, that we put information in the show notes of how people can learn more about your Queen Geniuses program and the work that you're doing. Because I just think that I think it's phenomenal. I think it's out of the box thinking, and as you said, it's very it's about being on a journey and not just like a one and done, experience. So, I want to thank you. I want to wish you well on your retreat. I hope that you continue your journey of self-awareness and understanding. And I just really appreciate you coming on here today.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here. I love it here and I love the work that you're doing. Please continue.
Thank you.